Mark, you're on mute.
My apologies. Thank you very much, Fabian and Claire. And the next couple of slides just really kind of underpin much of what Claire was talking about, why we ended up producing things like the Equality Impact Assessment 10-step guide, and then working with partners to produce the responsible buying guide for AI for local government. So it goes back to some of the responsibilities that we have as a regulator. We carried out some compliance work with local government across England and Scotland a few years back, seeking information on a range of activities. And one of the themes that we particularly looked at was local authorities' use of AI tools and services. So initial kind of correspondence to scope out where they were, followed up with some interviews to explore that in more detail. And whilst that was a relatively small scale qualitative piece of work, it produced some fairly rich findings that have informed the sort of work that Claire's been talking about earlier this afternoon, particularly around an inconsistent lack of equality consideration when thinking about AI, and a lack of confidence, particularly in talking to providers about equality considerations, and challenging tech providers in terms of equality issues. So I just want to talk through one of the examples. Claire mentioned that we published 6 case studies, examples of local government use of AI. So I'm just going to focus on some work in Barking and Dagenham, which is one of our London boroughs. And it goes back to the early 2020s. The local authority aspires to be a digital council and began some work in collaboration with technical specialists and behavioural scientists in order to develop an AI-powered website chatbot. And that would automatically respond to residents' general inquiries about things like refuse collection, about their local council tax. And it aimed to enable customers and service users to self-serve and reduce the number of costly phone inquiries the local authority was dealing with, but importantly, without compromising the quality of the service. So the chatbot was developed and piloted in the spring of 2021, and then following a period of lessons learned, it was launched more fully in the autumn of that year. But just going back to some of the things that Claire talked about, so before implementing the chatbot, the local authority considered its equality impact, its potential equality impact. So they reviewed the sort of evidence that Claire was talking about, and as a result of that, identified that there were a number of residents who couldn't access the internet, or if they could, may struggle to access digital services. And obviously that could put them at a disadvantage. So when we're thinking about that due regard consideration, both to eliminate unlawful discrimination, but also to advance equality of opportunity for those people who may not be able to access services in the same way. So in order to mitigate that, the council, alongside progressing with the chatbot, decided to retain some capacity in its telephone and face-to-face services. But they also introduced a team of dedicated face-to-face digital champions to actually work with residents to enable them to get online, to navigate the content, and to complete the sort of transactions in seeking the information and answers that they were looking for from their local authority. And importantly, they tested the chatbot with a customer community panel, and with groups of visually impaired people who use screen readers. So not only testing that the AI-powered tool delivers the outcomes that it wants, but also that they are considering and meeting their duty to make reasonable adjustments for people with disabilities. So in terms of where they got to, the chatbot has enabled more customers to self-serve. It's reduced the number of phone calls to the customer contact team by about 1,000 a month on average, and that's generated tangible financial savings for the council. And on the face of it, it seems to have a really positive customer satisfaction rating. So 85% rated the chatbot positively. But going back to what Claire was saying and what Fabian was saying at the beginning, that 85% is great if that's uniformly distributed across the residents of the local authority. But it's important to know, who makes up that 85% and who makes up the 15% who are less satisfied. Excuse me. So the local authority has started putting systems in place to monitor the equality impact of the chatbot. So it can it can look at task completion rates from the chatbot, and it can monitor those by the language used to engage with the chatbot. So the council's able to know if users of a particular language are having difficulties using it. For example, if you have a particular ethnic minority group with relatively low levels of English, you might be able to identify that. And then going back to what Claire was saying about that the continuing nature of the duty, you need to think about what that means for service users and to think about the actions that you put in place to kind of mitigate those less positive impacts and to tackle that ongoing kind of disadvantage that's in place. So it's certainly helped the council make traditional methods of contact more available, and what it's found is the telephone service is now much more focused on vulnerable customers, so people with limited digital literacy or access to the internet, but people who experience language barriers in engaging with the council. It's a continuing duty, but the council is also looking to develop and progress and evolve the tools itself. So as I mentioned, the chatbot can currently respond in English to messages typed in many different community languages. But recent developments in things like generative AI means that it may now be possible for the chatbot to respond in the language that it was asked the questions in the first place. And for somewhere like Barking and Dagenham, 64%, so 2/3 of residents have a first language that is other than English. So you can see that this is really important to to develop solutions, to make sure that the solutions are delivering the impact that you want, and to involve and mitigate any negative impact. But it's also looking at piloting voice recognition AI software in its telephone contact center. Again, to look at responding to low priority, non-urgent calls. And one of the things that they will be doing is testing with residents from different backgrounds, so people with perhaps disabilities with particular speech impairments, but also speakers of languages other than English, to make sure that the technology is able to cope with the range of accents and languages spoken in the borough. So it's one of 6 case studies that we've featured so far. We're really interested in capturing these case studies that both demonstrate what we've talked about in terms of inclusive AI tools and services, but also how public bodies in this context manage their non-technological duties alongside their use of AI to deliver more efficient, more effective products and services for their communities. So I shall stop there and hand back to you, Fabian.